Let's begin.
Hello and welcome to Pods Above Replacement, part of the Padres Hot Tub Podcast Network. My name is Raphie Cantor. I am the producer of Padres Hot Tub, and joining me from the Mile High City today is his bump day. It's John Precoda.
Hello there, Raphie. I'm going by John Zilla today. Who do you want to talk about?
I thought you were going to go by Precodasaurus, but that's very fair. We are going to be talking about a different genus of prehistoric beast, Blake Snell. Blake Snell, Snellzilla, the very close, and our closest one yet, winner of our YouTube poll, just edging out Yu Darvish, who I suspect is not long for Pods Above Replacement. I'm sure we'll see him very soon based on these results. But yeah, we're going to be talking about Blake Snell, the enigmatic starting pitcher for the San Diego Padres on his contract year, who presents quite the interesting case study for a pitcher with insane stuff and not so insane control, and what that does over the course of a long and storied career. Before we get started, I don't have my microphone. I have COVID right now. So I'm coming to you from the COVID dungeon back behind my glorious Fernando Tatis Jr. jersey. So we will go ahead and get started, but I apologize for any drop in quality in audio and train of thoughts. So with that in mind, let's talk about Blake Snell. He was born on December 4th, 1992. Which makes him 30 years old. This is his age 30 season. Drafted in the 2011 amateur draft, Comp A pick. Technically first round, I think, right? Is Comp A first round?
I think it's 1A, yeah.
Yeah, 1A. He was 52nd overall, taken by the Tampa Bay Rays out of high school. And he's currently on the final year of a contract that he signed in Tampa Bay that the Padres traded for, that has an average annual value of $10 million, 5 years, $50 million total. He's making $13.1 million this season, but from a luxury tax standpoint, he's just looking at $10 million a year. And like I said, he is a free agent at the end of this season. One thing about Blake Snell, big Seattle guy, absolutely loves the Pacific Northwest. I don't really know what else that entails, other than I just see him constantly repping, like University of Washington gear and all this stuff. He grew up in Shoreline, Washington, which is a suburb of Seattle. His dad actually was a minor league pitcher and worked with Blake a ton as a youngster. And, my favorite thing to look at from when we do these kind of look backs is the pitchers that were drafted out of high school. Their stats are just like bonkers because they're gods among men playing against 18-year-olds. So he had a 9-0 win-loss record, a 1.00 ERA, and 128 strikeouts in 63 innings pitched in his senior year. So, video game numbers do not even begin to describe it.
There's some 30-year-old out there that's saying, I'm the one that got him. I got him. I hit a double, scored a run. His ERA went from a 0.5 to a 1.0 and he's bragging to all his friends.
I would hang on to that forever. And so, again, these stats aren't going to be a surprise for anyone who has watched Blake Snell. He, throughout his minor league career, had an insanely high K rate, especially as he got close to the majors, but he was always bitten by walks and control. Interestingly, he's never allowed a lot of home runs, which I think speaks to the quality of his stuff. He's just a really hard guy to get solid contact off of. But when you look at his stats throughout his career, because of those low home run rates, they're almost entirely dictated by his FIP is almost entirely dictated by how much he's walking guys. So there were some years in the minors where he had FIPs of 2.17, 2.12, 2.70, insane, crazy good stuff. And you go and look at his walk rates. Oh, his walk rate was 2.64 that year. That's fantastic. just for a benchmark for folks, major league average for walks per nine tends to hover between 3 and 3.5. So it'll bounce around somewhere in that. And so anything below 3 is good. Anything getting close to 4 is bad. Anything like way above 4 is super bad. He had this great year in the minors in 2015 where he played across 3 levels, and he began the season with a 46 inning scoreless streak. Didn't allow a run for 46 innings across multiple levels of the minors. And that's around the time that Bernie Pleskoff, who was a scout for the Astros and the Mariners and currently a contributor to Forbes, wrote this scouting report that, again, we like to look back at these to see how they've aged. And he broke down the strengths and weaknesses of Blake Snell. And this is what he said in 2015 when Blake Snell was in AAA. Strengths. Snell is a crafty pitcher. He values swings and misses, but his maturity on the mound has led to a savvy approach of getting the hitter out. Snell has learned over time that a ground ball out is as valuable as a strikeout. Snell takes charge on the mound and is not intimidated by big hitters. He looks like he enjoys the challenges he faces with each at-bat. His secondary pitches have improved, making his fastball a much more viable weapon. We will certainly get to that later in the episode.
Yep, we will.
His weaknesses. A rhythm pitcher, Snell has to guard against getting out of sync. If he loses his release point, an at-bat can spiral out of control quickly as he loses sharp control. I believe Snell must add some strength and depth to his frame to endure the rigors of a long career. And this is what Bernie Pleskoff said was the future for Blake Snell in 2015. Well, I think he has a good chance to be a middle-of-the-rotation starter for the Rays as soon as next season. I believe his stuff is very well suited for a possible role in the bullpen as well. Regardless of the role Snell ultimately assumes, he is a valuable left-handed pitcher with high upside. And Snell, in a word, confident.
He's confident to talk to. I don't know if he's confident about letting hitters hit ground balls as opposed to trying to get a strikeout every time, but
yeah.
I do like these old reports. They're just kind of silly to look back upon.
Yeah, and I mean, like, again, some of this stuff is really, I would certainly agree with the fact that he's a rhythm pitcher who can easily start to get out of sync. I wouldn't necessarily associate that with confidence, but it's so it goes. And I'd love to play a quick little game with you, John, because we've started to do these. Looking back on MLB Pipeline rankings of Blake Snell and how he fared in the Rays organization at the time. In 2013, he was ranked as the Tampa Bay Rays 7th overall prospect. Who was the first? And both of these questions are Padres related, so I'm not going to, not throwing you out to the wind. Yeah, Padres related. 2013, Blake Snell is 7th in the Rays org. Who is the first?
Does Padres related mean not necessarily current, but at least at some point a Padre? Is that what you're trying to get?
Yeah.
Okay, 2013. Is that Will the Thrill?
Will the Thrill, baby. First overall prospect, 55 overall. This was after he had made the transition from being a catcher to now being an outfielder. And, there was talk that he could potentially be a center fielder at this point with a plus bat. So, of course, that's going to be super valuable. 2015, which is the same year that the scouting report that we just referenced was written, Blake Snell's actually down to 12th in the Rays organization, which is actually more of a mark about how strong the farm system was at the time, because he was ranked 12th in the Rays organization, but was still given a 55 overall ranking.
Oh, dang.
Yeah. So he had a 60 grade fastball, 55 grade slider, changeup 55, control 40,
You're right.
and overall grade 55. So in 2015, he was ranked 12th. Who was ranked 7th in the Rays org? This is Padres related.
2015, 7th. Cronenworth wasn't as good of a prospect at the time, and that was too early for him.
Yeah, I think he was still in college.
Is it a current or former Padre?
It is a current Padre.
Brent Honeywell.
Brent Honeywell Jr. was ranked 7th in the Rays organization, also ranked at 55 overall at the time, which just goes to show you. I mean, Brent Honeywell is an outlier in so many ways. I want to say this was even before his first Tommy John, and he's had 2. So, this just goes to show you the kind of paths that folks can take on their way to the major leagues. Blake Snell debuts on April 23rd, 2016 against the Yankees. And this was just like too perfect. I couldn't not bring it up. His first inning, he allowed a run off of a wild pitch. And then his second inning, he struck out the side. So
that sounds
that's
right.
Blake Snell. That's Blake Snell. Even in his
I've seen that.
debut.
I know that guy.
Yeah. In 2017, again, we're seeing that Blake Snell actually been consistent in some of his inconsistencies, which is a little bit oxymoronic or paradoxical or whatever you want to call it. But in 2017, he had a terrible first half. He had a 4.85 ERA, 5.14 FIP, 5.88 walks per nine. So again, like you said, anything above 4 is not good. He had a walks per nine around 6, so terrible. And he gets sent back down. He gets demoted after a year in the big leagues and goes back down to AAA Durham Bulls. He comes back in the second half on June 28th, and he then has a 3.49 ERA, a 3.56 FIP, and his walks per nine goes below 3. So basically, Blake Snell's entire fortune, because his stuff is so good, is tied to his walk rates. If he's not walking people, he is succeeding at an exceptional pace. There's the COVID. Exceptional pace. And if he's walking guys, he's not having success at all. So Blake Snell famously won the Cy Young in 2018 in a year, which, by the way, like, that was a really good pitching year. Like, I was looking at, it was like DeGrom at his full strength. He had a 9 WAR season, which is absurd. Verlander's at full strength. Scherzer's at full strength. Like, it's like Aaron Nola. Aaron Nola's at full strength. Austin Nola's certainly not at full strength.
They're both the same in terms of value. Let's give them credit.
Yes. Yeah. But there were a couple of hallmarks of that season for Blake Snell in 2018, which led to his success. So he had a 1.89 ERA, dumb good, in 180 innings pitched. Like, obviously that's fantastic.
But what about his 21-5 record? I think that's what the fans want to hear about.
That's what the baseball writers of America care about. He also had his lowest career walk rate over a full season, 3.19. Very solid. It's actually about league average, but like a league average walk rate with this stuff is remarkable.
That's crazy. A league average walk rate, and he had a 1.89 ERA. My God.
Yeah. He had the lowest BABIP of his career by far, by like 30 or 40 points. It was a 241 BABIP, which, kind of goes to show you that, like, BABIP can sometimes be an indicator of luck. Or it can also just be an indicator of, like, this guy's so good and people are generating super weak contact off of him. And that the numbers kind of bear that out when we'll break that down in the batted ball profile. But people were just not, like, able to get anything solid that season against Blake Snell. And as a result of that, by the way, he left an absurd amount of men on base that year, which, when we're talking about results, expected versus results and who should have won the Cy Young that year, because Blake's, there's an argument that there are some other pitchers that had quote unquote better seasons, especially from the analytical crowd that will make that argument. But in actual results, Blake Snell didn't let a lot of dudes score. And part of that was because 88% of the men who reached were left on base, which was by far the most in the AL. Second was Justin Verlander, who had an 85.3%, which is also very, very good. And those two men were the ones who dictated the Cy Young Award winning voting in 2018. Blake Snell just edging out Justin Verlander, 169 points for Blake Snell to Justin Verlander's 154. Of course, Justin Verlander had a 2.52 ERA over 214 innings pitched. So, paltry compared to to Blake Snell's 189. But again, if you look at some of the expected numbers, Justin Verlander had a lower FIP. Obviously, he threw more innings. There's an argument to be made there. I don't know if you want to weigh in on that at all, John.
Yeah, and my in-depth analysis is that he had 5 less wins. So come on, how can you win?
I almost spit out my coffee.
He was 16-9. Come on, you can't win a Cy Young with 16-9. No, but I did want to make an argument about. So this is the B War versus F War argument, and we are, as everyone knows, an F War podcast. However, when it comes to Cy Young, I do understand the value of B War in terms of why you would like maybe want to vote along the lines of what B War suggests. And that's because B War takes the actual results into account. Like he had a 189 ERA. And yeah, maybe expected numbers suggest that he shouldn't have had a 1.89 ERA, but he did. That's what happened. So was he more valuable because he gave up fewer runs? I would argue yes. And you could say, yeah, but that doesn't show how good of a pitcher he is, and that's fine. Whatever. Like maybe he's not a 189 ERA pitcher, and maybe he wasn't that year, but that's what actually happened, which means that he is more valuable to his team because of the actual results that occurred. The reason why I tend to go away from B-War in general is because you can have these lopsided years in which your numbers are not suggestive at all of your quality as a player. But if we're just saying what happened, he did have an incredible year. I mean, expected or not expected, but especially, what actually happened. If you get a 1.89 ERA, you are valuable to your team.
So yeah, it's that conversation about actual results versus expected results. And, if someone has a fluke year where they're incredible, do they deserve to win the Cy Young, or does it deserve to go to the person who's quote unquote more consistent or has the better expected stats? Because as we talked about in the scouting report in 2015, Blake Snell was never projected to be a Cy Young level pitcher. He was given a middle of the rotation rating. Maybe he's a bullpen type piece. And then he comes together. And in 2018, it's just one of those magical years where he puts it all together. And unfortunately for Blake in some way, that then becomes the expectation of, we know he's capable of doing this in a year. Therefore, we are going to value him as if this is who he is, when in actuality, for the entire time leading up to his major league debut and even in the beginning of his major league career, no one really thought of him in that light. So it's kind of like that band that has like a first album that is like a huge hit, and now it's like they have their whole life to write their first album, and now their second album needs to come out in 18 months. And then
but they wrote Mbop, so they're going to be good. Like
they're going to be good, of course. Yes, exactly. So, they wrote Never Gonna Give You Up, and Rick Astley is going to be the star of the 80s, and they're, that's how it plays out. So anyway, that's maybe a little harsh on Blake. But, John, I think you were going to talk to us a little bit about who Blake Snell was as he came into San Diego.
Yeah, and he was that pitcher. He was that I have won a Cy Young pitcher. And maybe he was closer to a, number 2, number 3 overall, but everybody knew that he had that Cy Young year in him. And so when he kind of struggled in 2021, especially, he gave some concerns. But even at the end of that year, when that year was not, his top peak year, he still had a good second half ERA. It was 3.24, which is good. And then he had a groin injury and it ended it. And then the same thing happened in 2022, where he started off poorly. He had a 5.60 ERA through his first 7 starts, which is pretty dang bad when you consider how good he was after that. After that, he, in the second half, he was 5th in the league in ERA. He had a 2.19 ERA in the second half. He was 3rd in strikeouts, 2nd in K rate. He was K'ing 12.12 per 9 innings. He was just really, really good in the second half. And that was, the question now. He's been a Padre a couple of years now, and his first halves have consistently been poor. His second halves have consistently been good. Why doesn't he just, be that second half Snell the whole time? What's he doing? Is he not prepping in the off season? I have no idea what's happening, but he has consistently been a good second half starting pitcher. And when you have that left-handed starting pitcher that's dominant, it's a huge value to your team. In fact, among left-handed starting pitchers, only Robbie Ray and Chris Sale have more double-digit strikeout games in the league. And he had 5 last year just after the All-Star break alone. And that's an incredible amount. Like Robbie Ray had 26 before this year, had 26 his entire career. And he had 5 just last year in the second half. So obviously, he was dominant in the second half. And then he went into the postseason and he had that like rather mediocre start against the Mets. He gave up basically a lot of walks, and that caused him to have a 3 1/3 inning start, which is kind of something that you see from him. But he also only gave up 2 runs, which is also something that you see from him. Even when he's struggling, he has the stuff to get through a difficult start. And he had a good start against the Dodgers. He was the only one that won against the Phillies, so he has the stuff that can carry a team out of that second or third starting pitching role from the left side, which is obviously incredibly valuable against the Dodgers, who consistently struggle against left-handed pitching. But he has that problem that is not news to anybody, I don't think, which is he doesn't go deep into games, right? Even when he won the Cy Young, he threw 180 innings. And what did you say Verlander threw? It was like 220 or something like that? 226?
Yeah, 214, I think.
214? Okay, so so he's throwing like 34 fewer innings even during his Cy Young, like his best season that he's ever had. But in like 2022, while he had a great second half, he still had 5.3 innings pitched per game starts. So to compare that to other Padres, Darvish was 6.5 innings pitched per game starts, which means that every other game he's throwing 7, and probably the other game he's throwing 6, And Musgrove was averaging 6. Even Manaea had 5.5. Snell was averaging 5.3. And not only that, but he was second on the team in pitches per game start. So he had 98 pitches per game start, which means that he's throwing a lot of pitches, on average 98, second only to Darvish at 99. But he still can only make it through 5 innings, basically. And it's been the same thing for his entire career, but especially as a Padre. In 2021, he averaged 4.8 innings. So on average, he didn't make it through the 5th inning, despite throwing plenty of pitches per game. He was third on the team that year in pitches per game started. And he couldn't make it through the 5th inning on average, which is crazy. But it's not so crazy when you consider his walk rate, which you referenced as a concern, as a scouting report issue, but also just something that everybody knows, that it's just been challenging for him to command the strike zone. And just to put some numbers to that, his walk rate, so just how many walks he gives up per plate appearance, for his career has been 10.6, which compares to a league average of 8.4. So 2%, over 2% more of a walk rate compared to league average, despite his dominant stuff. And it really comes down to, can he throw that first pitch strike? Is he able to do that? Because it makes a huge difference when he's able to get out in front of the count. And to be fair, it's the same thing for everybody. Everybody does way better when they're ahead in the count. But for Blake Snell in particular, when he is ahead in the count 0-1, after that, after he is ahead 0-1, the league average against him in terms of WOBA, where 320 is about average, against him is 239. 239, which is equivalent to a 2022 version of Austin Hedges, who had a 238 WOBA overall. However, when he's behind in the count 1-0, after that, everybody has a 347 WOBA against him, which in 2022 is equal to Vladdy Jr. or Matt Olson. So it's like super important for him to get out in front in the count. That's just like a very important thing. So the question is, how often does he do it? And you brought up the fact that he was confident in his scouting report, and the reason why I kind of didn't necessarily agree with that is because he seems a little bit afraid, at least on a 0-0 count, to put his stuff in the zone. And there's a good reason for that. Everybody is bad on a 0-0 pitch in the zone. Basically, everybody has like a WOBA against them when you put a pitch in the zone on a 0-0 count in the 400s. Almost every pitcher has a WOBA around that. And the reason why you still want to do that, put a pitch in the zone, that is because afterwards it's a huge advantage for you going forward. And even if they do put it in play, if they don't get a hit, which, a batting average on balls in play is only ever around 300 or a little bit higher, If the 70+% that they don't get a hit is a one pitch out, which is extraordinarily valuable to you as a pitcher. So putting the ball in the zone, as long as you're not just lobbing it up there, is a valuable thing. But since he's been a Padre since 2021, his first pitch in the zone rate has been 50.1%. So almost exactly half the time. And just to compare to, say, Yu Darvish, who also gives up the same amount of WOBA on that first pitch, which is around 400, like most pitchers, he throws it in the zone 57.5% of the time. So I would argue that Darvish is more confident in his stuff, knowing that, like, I would rather put a pitch in the zone, and if you hit it, fine, but if you don't, I have a huge advantage from the rest of this at bat going forward, because he's actually willing to put it in the plate, over the plate. And like I said, it changes everything for Snell. It changes, I mean, he can throw a fastball when he's behind in the count. I mean, when he's ahead in the count and you are looking breaking ball, so it makes his fastball look way better. However, when he is behind in the count, he basically throws only fastball. So if it's 1-0, 2-0, 3-0, 2-1, 3-1, you're going to get a fastball from him, which means that you know that you can hit it, right? And when he's behind in the count, his WOBA against his fastball is 459, which is incredibly bad, obviously. But what are you going to do? Like, he can't scare you that he's going to spot any other pitch, so you can just go up there looking for the fastball, and you can smoke it. No matter how good it is, if you know what pitch is coming, then you can hit it, as Astros showed. So then the argument is, all right, who is Blake Snell, right? And the thing about his confidence in the early going of a outing is that he can basically spot a fastball and get ahead in the count in like those first and second innings and the third innings. But his stuff drops off a lot as the game goes on. I would argue that he's kind of a glorified reliever, but a very good one that is good enough in like the fourth and fifth innings to make it so that I would still get more value from him if he was a starting pitcher. But his stuff drops off so much as the game goes on. Like, his first time through the order as a starting pitcher in his career, huge sample size, is a 2.45 ERA, which is obviously great. Second time through the order, 3.8, which is closer to average. And then the third time order is a 5.25, which is just terrible. And you can see this. Every time you see him pitch, you can see the shape of his fastball just get worse and worse every single inning as the game goes on. The first inning is at its best. The WOBA against his fastball in the first inning is a 285, which is terrible, or great for him, but terrible for the batter. But by the time the fifth inning rolls around, he has, fourth and fifth inning, it's a 450 WOBA in the fourth, and then a 370 in the fifth. So by the time the fourth and the fifth inning are rolling around, if he throws that first pitch fastball, there's a great chance that it's going to get smoked. And let's compare that to, say, Yu Darvish, whose fastball actually gets better as the game goes along. In the first inning, he has a 240 WOBA, and then by the time the fifth inning rolls around, it's a 169 WOBA against, which is incredibly good. And so while he's working his way into the game, Snell's working his way out of the game. And I mean, we saw that in the World Series where Snell got pulled early against the Dodgers, and they ended up losing, which drew a lot of news stories. But the Rays knew what they're doing. There's a reason why they can win so many games with such a small payroll. It was probably a good idea to pull Blake Snell at that time. The outcome was not what you would have wanted, but his stuff falls off so dramatically from inning to inning that you can say, yeah, but he was dominant that day. But you want to know why he was dominant? Because you took him out when he was still in his hot zone, when he was still throwing a fastball with a good ride and then breaking nasty pitches off of it. When he's a guy that can throw that fastball up at the top of the zone with good shape and then break things off of it, he's an incredibly nasty starting pitcher. But once that fourth and fifth inning comes around and he can't spot a good fastball and he's getting behind in the count because of that, because he's a little bit nervous and because his fastball doesn't have ride, then what is he? He's, Ryan Weathers, basically.
Yeah. I think just because we're going to put some, they call them Plinko charts, because if you guys have watched Price is Right, they look like the game Plinko where you put the puck in and then it goes down. And it basically shows the breakdown of okay, this is what the count is. They throw this pitch this often, and then it goes in different directions. one of the best things that I heard, it might be a Moneyball thing, but I can't remember. But thinking of plate appearances like a hand of blackjack, and basically as a hitter having to react based on what the cards are on the table, and the cards are the count. So we try and we talk about these things, and they're in very like kind of like all the data can seem a little bit overwhelming. But if you just think of an at bat in that way, where if you're behind 0-1, it's the same thing as like being a blackjack player and getting dealt 14, which is a bust card, and then the dealer is showing 20. It's like basically you have two impossible choices to make. You have to either hit on a card that's likely going to bust, or you have to stay knowing that the dealer has a really good chance of having 20 and then therefore making your total completely obsolete. And being ahead in the count is a similar thing, where if you're down 0-1, 0-2 as a hitter, you not only have to protect against like Blake Snell's insanely effective slider, which is not as insanely effective, which we'll talk about later. But you also then have to be guessing like, oh, he could throw me that fastball that, by the way, it's 2018. He's hitting like 96, 97 on constantly, and I'm not going to have any time to react to it. And so you can see why the outcomes get so and so poor for the hitters, whereas it's not easy. It's not difficult to see the other way around, where if you're behind or ahead in the count, 2-0, 3-0, you're like that blackjack player who's been dealt a 20, and then the dealer has been dealt 15, and then the dealer's going to have to hit, and you're never going to hit on it. So you can just sit and wait and be patient. And patience is a currency in baseball. So you have to, whoever has the kind of patience card is the one that's going to have the upper hand. So with that in mind, John, we're going to have kind of a stat of the episode. Maybe we'll do this going forward. But I know you're going to talk about his arsenal, but also break down Stuff Plus for us, which is our stat of the day, and why that is so useful in looking at Blake Snell.
Yeah, so just so we're all on the same page, Blake Snell's arsenal, he has that four-seam fastball that he likes to pump at the top of the zone, but sometimes he'll put it low in the zone too. He has a curveball, he has a slider, and he has a changeup, a pretty basic arsenal. Coming from the left side, he's got nasty stuff overall. So talking about Stuff Plus, it's proprietary. However, Saris has kind of given out a graph of the importance of every single pitch. It does differ based on like fastball versus off-speed pitch, because off-speed pitches are more reliant on the difference between that pitch and your fastball, which is your primary pitch. But either way, there are certain things that are more important and certain things that are less important for your stuff. And the most important thing for Stuff Plus, especially on off-speed pitches, is the velocity difference between that pitch and whatever your primary pitch is, which is usually a four-seam fastball or a two-seam fastball. But then your movement difference matters too. Your movement overall matters. Your pitch velocity matters. Your spin rate matters. Your release point matters. Your spin angle matters. And then the horizontal movement is kind of the least important thing. However, that can sometimes matter, especially in like certain pitches like a sweeper. So all of these variables are taken into account. And Blake Snell has always been a Stuff Plus darling. And he always will be, because he has a good fastball. He has breaking balls that everybody's going to be excited about. There'll be years where they maybe drop off a little bit, but it's not going to be a lot. And the thing about Stuff Plus is that Stuff Plus is where you make your money. So on an open market, it's been shown that Stuff Plus is more consistent year to year than Command is, than Location Plus is. And so while every team probably has a proprietary version of Stuff Plus, whatever their version of Stuff Plus is the thing that they're more likely to pay for, because it's more likely to be consistent. And if it's going to change, it's likely to change either only in a small manner in the negative direction, or possibly in a large manner in the positive direction if you can change the shape on a certain pitch. So Blake Snell, 4 pitches, fastball, slider, changeup, and curveball, that especially the breaking pitches and the fastball have always just been Stuff Plus darling pitches. I mean, he has some nasty stuff. I feel like everybody knows that, and that's kind of what makes him a little bit more frustrating as a pitcher, is because he's always falling behind in the count and going deep in the count, despite having such nasty stuff that if you just say, put that in the zone, and they won't be able to hit it. And it's been the same thing every year. We were going to talk a little bit about how things have changed in this 2023 year in particular, because there has been one noticeable change in terms of stuff plus for Blake Snell. And did you want to maybe hit on that with his slider?
Yeah. So again, we're so bad at doing plugs, John. Hopefully you're watching this on YouTube because we are throwing up tons of data. We're at Padres Hot Tub on YouTube. You can subscribe there. That's one of the number one ways you can help the show. We also are now part of the YouTube podcast scheme. So YouTube, if you update it, allows you to listen to shows that identify as podcasts in your pocket, without necessarily having premium YouTube. So you can press play, you can listen to it while you're walking around. And then if John and I are saying something where you're like, oh, I really like to look at the visuals for that, you can open it up and bam, the visuals are right there. It's super cool. Highly recommend it. But again, hopefully you're liking, commenting, subscribing on this video. That is the number one way that you can help this podcast. In 2022, Blake Snell's slider had a stuff plus rating of, I'm pulling it up right now, 117. Okay, so again, 100 and stuff plus is average. Anything below 100 is considered poor. Anything above 100 is considered good. And so 117 is good. It's a very good slider. And if you go to 2023, the stuff plus on his slider is 81. So he went from having a significantly above average pitch to a significantly below average pitch for his slider. And that is important in a couple ways. First of all, if you look on the screen right now, you'll see Blake Snell's vertical movement against average for his pitches over the course of his career. And we're going to play a very elementary game. One of these things is not like the other. So if you look at Blake Snell's vertical movement on his pitches, you'll see some movement, in certain things like his curveball is, kind of changed, but everything kind of bounces in the same range, between 2.5 above or 2.5 below average, until he gets to 2023. And in 2023, his slider vertical movement against average looks like this. It takes a huge downward trend. Now, that's a little counterintuitive because what that actually means is that his slider is not diving as much as it used to. It's actually, when we're saying movement against average, higher movement against average means that it's dropping more because that's what makes the slider a difficult pitch to hit. You want your slider to dive, and that differentiates it from its fastball, which is the pitch that it's going to be playing against. And if you look now on screen, you'll see Blake Snell's horizontal movement versus average over the course of the season. And while that curveball is an outlier that maybe we'll talk about later, it's not what's important. What's important is the slider. And the thing you'll see about the slider is that the horizontal movement on the slider hasn't changed. And that's also bad because if you're going to throw a slider that is no longer diving as much, you need it to sweep, which is, and John, I'll pass this back to you in a second because obviously sweepers are all the rage right now. But basically all that's happened with Blake Snell's slider from 2023 to 2022 is that it's stopped moving down as much. So, when you think about a classic old school slider that, looks like it's a fastball and then all of a sudden dives out of the way, his slider is now kind of a cement mixer, which is that pitch that spins but doesn't really break as much. And even though the results on his slider have not been terrible, what it's actually done is completely nuked the efficacy of his fastball. Because if those are the two pitches that are quote unquote tunneling off of each other, if the slider is not breaking in the way that it used to, it means that it's actually, in order to get to the place where you need it to be, which is out of the zone, it's actually going to look like it's out of the zone earlier in the kind of tunneling process. Because if a slider is spinning a lot, it can actually hang in that tunneling spot and then dive at the last minute in order to get out of the way of the zone. So, John, I don't know if you want to hop in and talk a little bit about the sweeper change and everything for Blake Snell.
Yeah, so you had said that you want more vertical movement on a slider, and that's especially true if you want to increase your whiff rate. However, it's okay to exchange vertical break on your slider if you're getting correspondent horizontal break on your slider as well. And that's kind of what differentiates the slider from the new sweeper fad. And the thing is that he dropped like he has 6 inches, over 6 inches of less vertical movement while also having less horizontal movement at the same velocity, which just doesn't make any sense. It's like, okay, so it's just a much worse pitch, and it is a much worse pitch. But the thing is, what I would imagine, my hypothesis on what he's trying to do is to switch to a sweeper, because a sweeper for Blake Snell would be a damn great pitch. It's a pitch that does not have the whiff rate of a slider, but gets poorer contact. And what is wrong with Blake Snell? It's that he falls behind in the count, and he's afraid to put pitches in the strike zone at times. If he could throw a sweeper, which the whole value of a sweeper is that you can throw it in the zone, and the point is that it's going to get poorer contact. Not necessarily more whiffs, but poorer contact. If he could be throwing that in a 0-0 count, 0-1, a 1-0 count early on in the count, and either they have to take it or get poor contact on it, I mean, that's the best possible scenario for Blake Snell, in my opinion. And it seems like that's what he was trying to do because of the difference in vertical movement. But the weird part is that it also has less horizontal movement, which I don't understand at all. And it basically just makes, like you said, a cement mixer. It makes it so that now it has like kind of poor fastball movement almost at the 23 inches of vertical movement, but is very slow for a fastball. I don't know what it is. It's like, it's a nothing pitch basically. And that's why Stuff Plus hates it so much. But I don't know. I don't know what he's trying to do with it. And maybe there's still changes to come, but if he ever could figure out a sweeper, and some pitchers just simply can't, but if he ever could, I could not imagine a better scenario for Blake Snell than to have that sweeper that, Steven Wilson's sweeper that he can throw early in the count to get ahead, and then just finish you off with his old slider or a curveball or a changeup or a fastball at the top of the zone. Unfortunately, whatever changes he tried to make, which are significant, so clearly he was trying to do something, because you don't just change your pitch by 6 inches without trying. Whatever he was trying to do just simply did not work.
Yeah, and that kind of bears out in the results on his pitches so far. So one of the things that you'll see, we're going to throw this on screen right now, is the batted ball profile between 2018, which again was his Cy Young year, and 2023, which is this year when we're recording this, is that hitters are able to pull the ball way more against Blake Snell this year than they were back then. So in 2018, only 27.8% of batted balls were pulled. This year, it's 41.7. So it's a dramatically different batted ball profile. And again, hitters want to be pulling the ball because there's more power there. That's the number one reason that people are doing that. But what that also shows to me is that, kind of like what you said about hitters being more patient. It's that hitters are hunting fastballs. They're just waiting. They're waiting until they're ahead in the count, which is frequently against Blake Snell. And then if you can get the timing right, because again, one of the great things about Blake Snell historically through his career is that he had a huge delta between his fastball and his breaking balls. He had like a 12.4 mile per hour delta in 2018 between his fastball, which was sitting like 95, 96, and his breaking balls, which were sitting around 83. This year, his fastball is like a tick slower, so it's in that 94, 95 range, and his breaking ball is in the 85 to 86 range. So there's not as much of a difference between those two things, and you add that up with the fact that he's now falling behind in counts. If you can get ahead of the count and hunt for a fastball, Blake Snell's biggest advantage is that you couldn't react to his fastball. Now you can. Now you can, cock your hands early and get ahead and get your hands around on a fastball and absolutely punish it. So, John, I think you have something in here about a breakdown on his fastball from last season that shows kind of what we're talking about here.
Yeah, and I feel like in general, the argument is kind of like first half Snell versus second half Snell. And obviously, second half Snell last year was very, very good. And what you saw as the year went on, he started off early in the year. He started a little bit late in May, but early on in the year, he had a 95.4 miles per hour fastball. And by the end of the year, it was a tick higher. And the xWOBA against it just went from very poor, 384, and then 418 in June, to extraordinarily good towards the end of the year, where in September he had a 257 xwOBA against his fastball, which says two things. One, that he was ahead in the count a lot because his fastball just performs better ahead in the count, but also his velo was up and his location was better. And so how does that compare to this year? This year, he is almost a full tick down from what he was even in May of last year. Now he's at 94.7 compared to 95.4 miles per hour last year, almost a full tick. And the xwOBA is worse than it ever was in any month of last year. And the velocity is down, which makes like the quality of the pitch worse, but also his location of the pitch is worse as well this year. So just in all regards, it has been worse so far this year. And okay, so last year he had a 1 point jump as the year went on. We can hope that maybe that's the same, it'll be the same case this year where his velocity will increase as the year goes on. But I don't know that that's necessarily true. Like our 1 year sample size doesn't dictate that suddenly he's going to get a lot better. And not only that, but our concern has been that his slider, just the shape of it, is much poorer than it was last year. And last year that was super, super advantageous for him to have that nasty slider because he used it very frequently against right-handed hitters who have been kind of his bane as the seasons have progressed. But last year, that nasty slider that was breaking a lot was so good against right-handed hitters. And I mean, there were starts where like 7 of his 13 strikeouts in a given game that was against the Cardinals were via the slider, and he was like striking out Paul Goldschmidt in that scenario. And folks just had a 259 wOBA as right-handed hitters against him in the second half, which is just like remarkably different than it was in the past. And now if he's throwing that cement mixer slider, he's not going to be able to get right-handers out. And he has a worse fastball, both in terms of location and velocity. I don't know exactly what his plan is, but so far he's been worse than he was in any month of last year in terms of like the quality of his pitches. And last year he got a lot better as the year went on. So I guess that's kind of what our hope is that he gets a lot better as the year goes on. And probably that's his hope too, because he's entering a contract year.
Yeah, so with all that in mind, I wanted to kind of do a little bit of a breakdown and show what this all looks like in the real world. Obviously this is a lot of information we're throwing at you guys. Some of it can be a little bit hard to conceptualize. So I picked out a couple of at-bats. They're 5 seasons apart. One of them is from this season, and one of them is from his Cy Young Award-winning season in 2018. And I picked these at-bats for a couple reasons. One, they're both against lefties. Unsurprisingly, because they're both against lefties, there were only 2 types of pitches that Blake Snell threw. He threw a fastball and a slider. And this is when the fastball and the slider, in 2018 were at the peak of its powers. And this year are obviously suffering a little bit more. So the first at-bat that I'm going to show you is an at-bat that he had in Atlanta against Matt Olson on April 6th. And Matt Olson ends up hitting a double in this at-bat. So, like I said, it starts with a 2-0 count, a fastball and a slider that missed the zone. And then pitch 3, which you'll see right now, Blake Snell throws a fastball, and he just misses his spot. But this is what's really important about this fastball. It's only 93 miles an hour. It's 93 miles an hour at the knees. The next pitch he throws is actually a really good pitch. It's a slider that is just outside. It's like a perfect, you're throwing a low and away slider that Juan Soto would hate and not swing at to Matt Olson, and Matt Olson swings at it. And it's a successful setup pitch, and that one is 88 miles an hour. Here's what's important. Pitch 5, which is up right now, Blake Snell misses his location by a lot. Austin Nola, actually, I don't know who was catching that day. So whoever was catching is set up at the top of the zone. This is supposed to be a high fastball, which again, after throwing a low and away slider that Matt Olson swung at, is like the ideal pitch. You want to throw, a fastball at the letters. Blake Snell not only throws the fastball down, it's in literally the exact same spot as where he threw the third pitch, the fastball that Matt Olson fouled off. And Blake Snell then, throws the fastball right down the middle of the knees, and Matt Olson hits it into left field for a double. Now, I said that the velocity on that third pitch was important. The delta between the fastball and the slider in this at-bat is only 5, 6, 7 miles an hour. So basically, it's kind of what you were talking about earlier, John, about the characteristics of the slider without the drop that he used to have is actually kind of just like a really poor fastball. Now, obviously, the slider that he threw was quite successful because he threw it in the exact right location. But one of the things that we always constantly harp on in the show is that on average, pitchers miss their spots by about 13 inches. So if the characteristics of your pitch are off and the delta between the velocity on your fastball and slider is not very big, you haven't slowed down or sped up the bat in the way that you want. So the adjustment that Matt Olson has to make, again, Matt Olson, very good hitter, but the adjustment that he has to make is not as grand as it would be as if you were facing Blake Snell in 2018. So with that in mind, let's move to Blake Snell's at bat. Go ahead, John.
So just one thing for repetitive nature, which is good for learning. Like I said, in Stuff Plus, the velocity difference on an off-speed pitcher breaking ball is literally the most important thing above movement difference between that pitch and your primary pitch, which for Blake Snell is a four-seam fastball. So you're saying not only was the delta on the velocity not very much, but I mean, currently this year, his movement is also not very much. That explains why the slider has been graded out so poorly for Stuff Plus so far this year.
And I'm really glad you jumped in because I forgot to mention this. I'm throwing up on screen right now. StatCast has unbelievable tools. And one of them is the pitch visualizer that lets you see in 3D what these pitches look like and what they look like from the perspective of the batter. So I'm going to throw up Matt Olson's perspective on the fastball and the slider. So when you look at the slider, one of the things you'll notice is that it looks out of the hand like a low and away pitch. And that's a problem because it means that a seasoned hitter is going to be able to pick up on, hey, this is junk, especially a lefty who is expecting a low and away slider at some point in this at-bat. A pitch that has a lot more vertical and horizontal movement is going to look more like a fastball on the way to the plate and then dive out of the way. If you have that kind of cement mixer style slider that we're seeing right now, it's going to look like a poor pitch because, like I said, this fourth pitch that Blake Snell threw, the slider that was low and away, it hit its spot perfectly. It was like a perfectly executed slider. But if that pitch doesn't hit its spot, it is a dangerous, dangerous pitch because it's going to be picked up on right away. Now, moving back 5 years to 2018, he's facing D. Gordon. He's actually playing in Seattle, his hometown, which I thought was a nice touch. This was his best performance. He had a 12 strikeout game against the Mariners for the Rays on June 3rd, 2018. This is in the first inning. D. Gordon has a 6-pitch at-bat that ends in a strikeout. And much like the Matt Olson at-bat, Blake Snell also falls behind 2-0 in this at-bat. But the 4th, 5th, and 6th pitch has a really interesting sequence where on the 4th and 5th pitch, he throws 2 fastballs, one's 96, one's 97, right down the middle. And D. Gordon cannot catch up to them. They are foul tip on one, fouls the other one off. And then the 6th pitch is a front door slider, which absolutely is a knee buckler for any mortal. I mean, D. Gordon, the fact that he was able to stay on his feet for this is quite remarkable. But one of the things you'll notice when I put up that kind of tunneling view is Blake Snell confidently throwing his fastball. The first 5 pitches of this at bat are 96 and 97 mile an hour fastballs. So the bat is completely sped up for D. Gordon. And so on that 6th pitch, when he decides to pull the string and throw a slider, if you look from the front view, the slider looks almost exactly like these fastballs because it's a diving, vertically moving slider. And all of a sudden at the last minute, it just kind of falls off of the table. So we can see with these 2 different at-bats just how much a difference in the slider, those slight few inches, makes a world of difference for the expected outcomes and the real-world outcomes for Blake Snell. So with that in mind, we can't really do our fuck, marry, kill that we normally do on this because Blake Snell is not a pre-arb player. There's, I guess we could potentially be talking about an extension, but I don't think that that's very likely at this point. So right now it's basically like, are we going to be signing Blake Snell to a free agent deal at the end of the year? And I think, John, you pointed out similar to a Robbie Ray type deal. Is that correct?
Yeah, I mean, Robbie Ray got 5 years, 115 million. Now it is a few years later, wherein you would expect the contracts to even go higher. But I mean, I don't know. Let's just say that he was a 20 million a year player, probably even plus, but at least a 20 million a year player. Is that a guy that you want on your roster? So he's twice as much AAV at least as he is currently, where he's sitting at that 10 million AAV. Are you opportunity cost signing Blake Snell?
Well, it's a great question. I think, of course, you have to look at who's also in the free agent class. Shohei Ohtani, of course, is kind of in a class of his own. It's not even really worth talking about him. Max Scherzer has a player option. I suspect he'll accept that player option given the way that he's pitched so far. Marcus Stroman also has a player option. So the unrestricted free agents are Clayton Kershaw, who, I mean, is probably going to be a Dodger. Hyunjin Ryu, Martin Perez, Adam Wainwright, Julio Urias, Noah Syndergaard, Alex Wood, Zach Greinke, Aaron Nola, Carlos Carrasco. These are pitchers that I think in some cases are a little bit comparable to Blake Snell. I still think Blake Snell is going to be leading the way just in terms of stuff among this class. But it just in terms of outcomes, I think that there's some arguments to be made that there are pitchers in here that are going to be fetching similar prices. It becomes a matter of, are the Padres committed to spending money on a pitcher no matter what? Or is signing Blake Snell or even signing him before the season ends, before he leaves for free agency, is that going to guarantee that we will spend money that we wouldn't necessarily spend out on the open market? Because right now, organizationally, the Padres are really backed into a corner from the starting pitcher standpoint. There's no help waiting in the wings. The help is known quantities. It's Ryan Weathers. It's Jay Groom, who, speaking of guys who are walking guys out of control, I mean, he has like a 7 or 8 walks per 9 rate in El Paso right now. So I don't necessarily know that if Blake Snell's not your cup of tea, that Jay Groom's any better. So the Padres are going to have to sign someone. And then for me, it comes down to there's a little bit of entertainment value mixed in here, which is that Blake Snell's among the more frustrating pitchers to watch. And I think just in my head, I'm kind of like, do I want to keep watching this guy? I would say that, personally, I would not be signing Blake Snell just because, especially if his slider continues to degrade, that's basically an unrecoverable progression in his career, I think, because the stuff is everything for him. And if he's throwing an 81 stuff plus pitch for the rest of the season, like I don't think that that's something that's going to age particularly well. How do you feel about this, John?
Yeah, so this is tough for me. So I agree that we have essentially no one on the horizon in terms of starting pitchers. There's Jay Groom, and then there's people like Jackson Wolf, Adam Mazer, maybe will at some point. But these are not certainly number 3 starters, right, that you would just like put into a playoff rotation. So we're backed into a corner a little bit there. I do see a scenario in which Blake Snell goes to a team that is able to teach him a sweeper that allows him to get ahead in the count, and suddenly he's literally one of the better pitchers in the game. Because if he could throw that sweeper type pitch with poor contact early in the count, suddenly you're solving all of his problems all at once, wherein now he's allowed to throw strikes early in the count, and if folks are swinging, he's also getting way more like innings per pitch. And so now he's going deeper into ball games, he's getting poorer contact, he's getting out ahead in the count, and now he's dominant. So there's those two things. It's like, do I see a scenario in which he becomes a higher level player than he is now? Yes, I do see that. I could see him being, I think that his ceiling is just the best pitcher in the league, or one of the better pitchers in the league. And the second question to that is, do I think that we're the ones that are going to bring that out of him? And sadly, I do not. But Ruben Niebla, maybe. I mean, as far as his career has gone, he's been great at getting pitchers to, reach their maximum level of quality. And maybe it was just an off season that he tried something and it didn't work, and he's still working at it, and he still has that higher ceiling. And in the second half, things really, as his fastball velocity increases, and then his pitch shape either goes back to where it was, and he's still a good player, or it gets even better and he's a great player. I could see all of these arguments playing out. And I do think that in terms of development, we are ahead in pitching now with Niebla than we are in developing position players. At the same time, current Snell, I don't see that this turning around by the end of this year to the extent that you want to sign him for 5 years and over $100 million. So no, I do not think that he would be worth it according to current values. However, there is a great chance, I think, that he goes somewhere and just becomes dominant.
Yeah. I mean, I think we've been saying for a long time that he clearly loves Seattle. I think would be really entertaining the idea of going and playing in Seattle for the Mariners, and they seem like the type of I mean, Robbie Ray's there, so they're certainly not afraid of signing that type of deal for a pitcher. Who knows if they'll pony up. But just really quickly to close, I'm so bummed we didn't do Blake Snell's horoscope sign at the beginning of the episode. I totally forgot to put this in, but I was just looking it up, and it's so perfect. I could not end this episode without saying it. So December 4th, he's a Sagittarius. That is a fire sign. So, just think of fire. Think of someone who's super fiery. The strengths of a Sagittarius are generous, idealistic, great sense of humor. Awesome. Blake Snell, hilarious guy. This is what I love. Weaknesses: promises more than can deliver. Very, very impatient. Will say anything no matter how undiplomatic. So
that's true. Like what is a WRC plus, for example? Yeah. All right. Maybe horoscopes are real. I don't know. Maybe I need to start looking into this.
Promises more than can deliver. I mean, God, if that's not the subheader to the Blake Snell story, I don't know what is. Yeah, man. This is a really awesome episode. Anything you want to add before we get out of here?
No, I think that what I'm going to be watching for as this season progresses is whether his slider changes in shape, whether he develops that, honestly, he should have that sweeper and a slider, because the slider is effective, especially when he wants to get that strikeout. But I mean, and he has Yu Darvish around to tell him that he can do both. You don't have to do one or the other. You can use them in certain scenarios. And that sweeper early in the count and slider late in the count would just be, I could see there being a dominant outcome for Blake Snell overall. So that's just what I'm going to be watching. And I just want to say that for the horoscope portion of the episode, that goes out to North County enthusiast who just really wants to know about everybody's horoscope. So he's on the Discord. If anybody wants to get on the Discord, go ahead. You can talk to North County enthusiast about his horoscope and everybody's horoscopes. He loves that stuff.
Yeah, patreon.com/Padres Hot Tub for just $5 a month. You can berate North County enthusiast about his horoscope signs. It's also a great way to help the show and talk to John and I about the Pods Above Replacement Discord channel. We're in there all the time, having lots of. Shout out to a lot of the guys in the in that Discord chat, because there are some super knowledgeable people. I don't know if you saw Heel and Cal's breakdown of the Padres hitting in no outs, 1 out, and 2 outs, and they're abysmal with 1 out, and then totally fine with 0 outs and 2 outs. It's kind of crazy.
Yeah. He's been a great addition to the Discord this year. I'm appreciating him this year.
Yeah. So, John and I are of course apologetic that we did not cover Blake Snell's Fortnite Plus stats.
They're over 100. They're over 100.
That is for a later episode. But for John Precoda, I'm Raphie Cantor. Thank you again for another episode of Pods Above Replacement, and check our YouTube poll so you can vote on who will be next, and we'll see you then.